My boat was gone, vanished like it had never existed. And when I rewound the security footage there, she was Judith Zimmerman, the HOA president, standing on my private dock, handing my boat keys to two teenagers like she was running some kind of summer camp. 10 minutes later, she was waving them off across the bay, with my $50-something thousand boat. That was the moment I knew I wasn't dealing with a nuisance, I was dealing with someone who thought she was above the law. I'm Nayland Derry, former Coast Guard and current marina engineer, and when I bought my place at Seabrize Shores, I thought I'd finally earned some peace. I'd spent years dragging busted boats out of hurricane debris fields, patching up hulls for people who didn't have insurance, and living on black coffee and adrenaline during storm seasons. So when I found a quiet waterfront home with a deeded private dock, emphasis on private, it felt like the universe had finally tossed me a bone. Just me, my boat, a cold beer on weekends. Simple dreams. But quiet neighborhoods always have that one person. For us, her name was Judith. Platinum blonde bob wedge sandals loud enough to echo through concrete, a clipboard glued to her wrist, and a voice like gravel in a blender. Our lovely HOA president. She once fined a guy for aggressively colored curtains. She measured grass with a ruler. She printed bylaws like they were holy scripture. And somehow she decided my dock, my deeded dock, fell under her jurisdiction. The first warning sign was a note taped to my door. Per HOA guidelines, it said all docked watercraft require inspection. Provide access to your vessel immediately. I snorted, crumpled it, tossed it. My dock was in county records and no HOA could override that. I figured ignoring her was enough. It wasn't. 3 days later, I came home exhausted from a long shift, dreaming of a quiet evening, only to find empty water where my boat should have been. Clean ropes coiled neatly. No disturbance. Not even a footprint. For a split second, I honestly wondered if I'd lost my damn mind. But then I remembered the camera mounted above the boathouse. I opened the footage and nearly spilled hot coffee down my leg. Judith, standing on my dock like she owned the place, wearing a ridiculous sun hat, gesturing to two teenagers, handing one of them my keys. Then she folded her arms, watched them untie the lines and wave them off across the bay like she was sending her kids to summer camp. I just stood there staring, jaw unhinged. I mean, who does that? 5 minutes later, I was on the phone with the sheriff's office. When I told the deputy the boat was worth around $60 grand, he whistled. That's grand theft, sir. You got the footage? Oh, I had the footage. Beautiful, crystal clear evidence of Judith's entitlement in HD. An hour later, I handed over a flash drive and the HOA document where she pretended to have authority over my dock. The deputy squinted at it. She really thinks this gives her the right. I shrugged. She thinks she is the law. Luckily for me, I'd installed a GPS tracker 2 weeks earlier after a friend's boat got stolen. Pulled it up, showed them exactly where my boat was anchored near an island bar, probably with teenagers drinking sodas on my deck cushions. The deputy adjusted his belt. Mind if we pay her a visit? Oh, I said, please, lead the way. Following the sheriff's cruiser down Marina Road, I felt a strange mix of fury and disbelief. The tracker showed my boat hadn't moved. When we arrived, the Marine unit was already prepping a patrol craft. As we cut across the water, I saw my boat floating peacefully near a sandbar, like nothing was wrong. The teenagers were dangling their feet in the water, and one was wearing my old Coast Guard cap. I clenched my jaw so hard it crackled, and there she was, Judith, at my helm, arms crossed, sunglasses on, pretending she was the captain of her own yacht tour. Step away from the console, the Marine deputy shouted. Judith spun around. Excuse me, this is a private recreational event. You're disrupting an HOA sanctioned. We have a report of stolen property, the deputy barked. Step off the vessel. The teenagers didn't wait. They bailed off the side, paddling toward shore like rats off a sinking ship. Judith, though, doubled down. This boat is part of the community's coastal access. The HOA has collective interest. The deputy looked at me like, is she serious? I nodded. Oh yes, she was dead serious. They cuffed her once we got back to shore. She kept trying to throw out big words, political retaliation, community enforcement, legal oversight, but the officers didn't even blink. She was charged with grand theft, unlawful use of a watercraft, and trespassing. Watching her sit on the back bench of that patrol boat, arms crossed and glaring at the horizon, I felt not satisfaction, just quiet vindication. I figured that was the end. Boat-back arrest made sanity restored, but it was only the spark. 2 weeks passed. Then one afternoon, a woman knocked on my door, Elise, a schoolteacher type with nervous hands. "I heard what happened," she said. "Judith tried to extort my husband last year. Paddleboard lessons for free. Threatened to revoke beach access. A stack of highlighted emails proved everything." The next day, an elderly couple came forward. They'd been fined because their garden gnome reflected sunlight into Judith's window. A nurse said Judith accused her of unsanctioned exterior lighting over motion sensors. 2 veterans had been denied permission for a flagpole. Story after story, letter after letter, all with Judith's signature. At some point, I started to question myself. Was I blowing this out of proportion? Was I dragging a whole neighborhood into a mess because I refused to let a boat go? Maybe I should have ignored her note. Maybe I should have played along. These thoughts hit me late at night when the house was too quiet and the guilt crept in like damp air. But then I'd look at the emails Elise gave me, at the trembling hands of the elderly couple, at the veterans who just wanted to fly a flag, and the doubt turned into something sharper, something steadier. If I backed down, Judith would just keep going, and sooner or later, someone would get hurt. So I compiled everything into a massive document and sent it to the state attorney's office. The response came in 3 days. They opened a formal investigation into the HOA board, every single member, and the more they dug, the worse it got. Turns out half the board was appointed without a vote, bylaws rewritten privately, annual meetings not recorded. Judith had basically been running a miniature dictatorship. Then came the financial bombshell. Tanya, a forensic accountant who lived 2 streets over, examined the HOA's statements. $30,000 missing. A landscaping vendor that didn't exist. A P.O. box tied to Judith's maiden name. It was like peeling wallpaper and discovering rot behind every layer. A detective from the state attorney's office called to tell me there were also suspicious insurance reimbursements checks processed through a shell contractor connected to Judith's cousin. That pushed everything into federal territory. "We're talking wire fraud," the detective said. "This may escalate to a RICO investigation." I hung up and stared out at the bay, the water calm and glassy, and wondered how a stolen boat had turned into a full-scale criminal enterprise. I didn't want this war, but it had landed in my backyard, and there was no backing out now. The grand jury subpoenaed me. Sitting in that marble courthouse waiting room, I felt small. Not afraid, just small. Like everything I said could tilt someone's life. But when they called my name, something steadied inside me. I'd spent years testifying after maritime accidents and storm rescues. Truth had weight. It always did. I told them everything. The note, the footage, the GPS ping, the arrest. Then the neighbors, the phony invoices, the shell companies. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I let the facts do the damage. When the grand jury returned, the indictments were brutal. 8 counts: grand theft, racketeering, wire fraud, identity fraud, obstruction, and more. Judith's kingdom crumbled overnight. Then came the trial. I sat in the courtroom behind the prosecution table, hands clasped, watching Judith take her seat. For once, she wasn't wearing wedge sandals or waving a clipboard. She looked small, still arrogant, but small. The jury watched the footage of her handing off my keys. Silence. Even the judge raised his eyebrows. Tanya explained the fake invoices and the phantom landscaping company. Federal agents presented bank records, transfers, phone calls. There was even audio of Judith coaching her cousin to keep reimbursements under $5,000 to avoid audits. The defense tried to argue miscommunication and community improvement, but it fell flat. Everyone in that room knew what they'd heard. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours before returning guilty on all counts. 2 weeks later at sentencing, the judge laid it out plainly. "You turned a neighborhood into a racket," he said. "You misused your authority, manipulated your neighbors, and showed no remorse." Then he sentenced her to 7 years in federal prison, no parole for 5. I didn't smile. did not celebrate. I just watched as deputies escorted her out of the room. Judith didn't look back. Maybe she finally understood she wasn't untouchable. When the courtroom doors closed behind her, the sound echoed like a dock cleat snapping into place, clean, sharp, final. Justice, not joyful, not triumphant, just necessary. And if there's one thing this whole nightmare taught me, it's this. Bullies thrive in silence until someone finally says enough.